Good morning, all. This is John Kogan. I'm the CEO of Performative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, the CFO's role as Chief Revenue Officer. Almost every company is looking for top-line revenue growth, yet typical approaches to sales and marketing have significantly lost effectiveness in today's business environment. Achieving growth in the new normal requires the same systemic and disciplined approach businesses have been applying to other parts of their organizations for years, and CFOs and other finance and accounting and treasury and related leaders are in a unique position to lead this effort. In today's webinar, we'll discuss new approaches to revenue measurement and production and highlight success stories that have helped generate average sales improvements helped generate above average sales improvement, with discussion on how the Office of the CFO can help drive results. Before we get going today, I'd first like to thank our sponsor, Baker Tilly. Pardon me. Baker Tilly has helped us by providing content and also speakers for today's presentation. They are steeped in the content that we'll be covering today and in many similar elements of finance leadership across the enterprise, and we appreciate their participation. Also, with their support, we are able to bring this, like all programs, to Performative members for no cost, which we greatly appreciate. A quick note on Performative itself. We are the largest and fastest growing online community of senior level corporate finance, treasury, accounting, and related professionals. We reach over 600,000 of these folks every month. Performative is a wonderful online and offline resource if you ever have a question. We have literally hundreds of thousands of folks in the online community who are happy to answer it, and they're peers of yours. So it's a great place. It's all commercial-free, noise-free, and it's just a wonderful place to find peer-based advice. So check it out at performative.com. A few notes on today's event, a link to today's presentation, and a link to the recording of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. The soft copy of today's event is already uploaded on performative.com. So if you go to www.performative.com/resources, you'll see it there available if you want to follow along at home. This is a CPE credit event. We will have 3 polling questions during the event, and if you are here for CPE credit, you'll need to answer all 3 polling questions. Even if you are not here for CPE credit, we'd love to see what's going on at your company. So please, by all means, take the 15 or 20 seconds, take a quick peek at those questions, answer them, and if we have time at the end of today's presentation, we'll turn the results around, all of which are anonymized, and show you what your peers are doing on that front, and it'll be great to let everyone see what everyone else is doing. Next note is we'd love you to ask questions during today's event. We will have a Q&A period at the end of the presentation that we'll be running through initially. And when we get to those questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can ask questions at any point during today's program. If you take a quick look at your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see a little questions area there. You may have to hit the plus to pop it open, but feel free to ask questions at any time, and we'll do our best to get to them. Finally, you will be asked to take a short survey regarding today's webinar after the event. It takes about 60 seconds, just a few clicks of the mouse. We would really appreciate that extra minute. And not only does that help us do better the next time, which we're always interested in doing, but also if you would like to be connected with Bruce Bendix from Baker Tilly, one of today's speakers, or to Baker Tilly in general for follow-up questions, you can do that with just a click of a mouse. So that's nice and easy to do. We have a number of learning objectives today. Primarily, we want the audience to understand why revenue is at risk for many companies and how the Office of the CFO can help. There's actually an awful lot that the Office of the CFO can do here, and we hope to help you all gain insight into the new buying process and misalignment with most sales and marketing practices, understand why revenue performance is a process and measurement issue, which happens to be our specialty within the Office of the CFO. And see how the Office of the CFO is able to help their broader organizations come to grips with revenue issues and help them really set up people, process, and technology to perform well and succeed. And helping us do that today, we've got 2 wonderful speakers, and it's my pleasure to introduce them right now. First up is Bruce Bendix, who is a director in the Growth Strategies Consulting Group of Baker Tilly Virchow & Krauss. He has 20 years of consulting experience working with small, medium, and large clients across a wide range of industries. Bruce's expertise is in assessing, creating, and implementing innovative strategies for sustainable, profitable growth. Joining Bruce this morning will be Craig McHale. Craig is the CEO of Revenue Performance Management Group, which is one of Australia's leading sales, marketing, and strategic business consultancies. After 10 years of strategic and operational consulting experience at a Big Four accounting and advisory firm, chiefly in the telecom, technology, and online sectors, Craig spent nearly 8 years in senior executive management roles for some of Australia's best-known technology and telecom companies. Craig specializes in building profitable revenue streams and fixing underperforming marketing and sales functions. He has built, managed, worked in, and advised marketing and sales organizations around the world as a CEO, COO, sales leader, and management consultant. So we're really looking forward to hearing from both of them this morning. And Bruce, why don't we let you take it away?
Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here today. To start out, perhaps many of you have read the book or seen the movie Moneyball. For those that don't know, it's of course the story about how Billy Beane was able to create a winning baseball team despite lacking the big payrolls of the big market teams. And in this case, necessity forced Billy Beane to either adapt or die. So he looks at a game that has been managed and played in exactly the same way since 1876, and he looked at it in a way which nobody before him had dared to look at. He employed a concept called sabermetrics, and in so doing, he discovered new value in simple, unspectacular, unexpected places. And like Major League Baseball, the game of making revenue has for the most part been managed and played in pretty much the same way for as long as anyone could remember. It's also for the most part been based on historical measures that were never questioned and which failed to capture what was truly adding value. When we ask chief sales officers and sales leaders how they measure sales performance, more than half still tell us that they don't measure it at all. Of the remainder, most depend solely on a single trailing indicator, performance against quota. Those that rely on anything further talk about the size or trend of their pipeline or perhaps the number of proposals that result in a win. Based upon our knowledge and experience working with these dysfunctional sales organizations, these metrics are subject to wild fluctuations even within the same company. So in short, save for a few isolated exceptions, nobody really understands very much about the value of their revenue process or what's gone missing. So they continue to flounder. And like Major League Scouts used to do, organizations continue to spend big dollars on salespeople without really truly understanding the process involved or how much value these people really add, if any. And then they just sit there waiting for them to hit home runs. Just as Billy Beane showed that sustainable success in baseball is about buying wins rather than players, and by getting those players from one base to the next, sustainable success in revenue comes from repeatedly and consistently executing a series of interconnected actions that can be broken down, managed, and measured in a logical sequence. Just like going from first, then to second, and third, and finally home. What we found is that there's a whole lot of value in the revenue creation process that currently isn't understood. And as a result, most organizations' sales results look like, well, the Oakland Athletics baseball team before Billy Beane came in and showed them really how to turn an unfair game on its head to their advantage. So why is this game of revenue so important now, and why are you, as CFOs, increasingly concerned? Well, first, many of you expect the strong headwinds to continue. Many of you are doubtful that the U.S. will experience any meaningful recovery next year. And there's plenty of blame to go around. The fiscal cliff, political gridlock, lingering effects from deleveraging brought by the global financial crisis, and a long-term decline in U.S. competitiveness. So consequently, many of you are becoming more pessimistic about your financial prospects. but that hasn't changed the expectations of your shareholders and boards that expect growth. So why is this topic relevant to you, the CFO? I mean, shouldn't this be a discussion for the chief sales and marketing officers? Well, we'll show you the topic is relevant to you for two reasons. First of all, the role of the CFO has changed. You know, as the above chart shows, CFOs have advanced to a strategic position in most companies. They have moved beyond just finance to be strategic advisors to the business. And at least 50% of you are involved in revenue planning and almost 25% in creating the revenue plan. An even greater number are responsible for the key performance indicators of the business, which is really what revenue performance management is all about. The second reason is, as we'll point out, the strengths of the CFO function are exactly the skills needed now in sales and marketing. CFOs have been the owners of budgeting and forecasting, but now need to extend their reach to the sales and marketing to really understand the drivers of revenue. Sales and marketing needs the discipline of process and measurement, which is the strength of most finance functions.
Guys, if anyone doubts that the game of creating revenue isn't about process and measurement, just consider this conversation that we've been having with management teams down here in Australia, actually, and also in the United States and Europe over the last 8 or 9 years. If you want to follow on the slide, I'm going to start at the bottom of the conversation and work up. Invite you to apply your own numbers if you like, or if you can. So the first question we ask is, what's your organisation's new revenue target next year? The answer in this example, and this actually does come from a real-life case study, is $10 million. Now, question 2 then, what's your organisation's average sale or contract value? And in this case, the answer, $100,000. Okay, so therefore, to get your $10 million, you need to close 100 new deals. Question 3, what's your organisation's proposal to close ratio? Could be offer to close, don't get hung up on the terminology. Can be a proposal or a quote or whatever that final offer to the customer looks like, the final offer that they can either accept or reject. So what's that number for your organisation? The answer, well, usually it's we don't know. But across our sample data last year, it was just less than 1 in 5, so we used 20% for the illustration. And at 20%, your sales team needs to submit 500 proposals or quotes or whatever to get 100 over the line if they're operating at the benchmark. So question 4 then, before you can make any customer an offer, you have to meet them. Sometimes it's physically, sometimes by phone or even online. But there has to be a first meaningful point of sales contact. We call it a meeting. So what's your meeting to proposal ratio? And the answer again usually is we don't know because we don't measure that. But our research shows it to be about 1 in 3 on average. So we use 33% for the illustration. And at 33%, your sales team needs to go to 1,500 first meetings or appointments in order to generate those 500 proposals. Question 5. Before sales can secure a meeting or appointment, there must be leads for them to work on. So at what rate is your organisation currently converting leads into meetings? And again, the answer is usually we've got no idea, but our research shows it to be about 1 in 3 again, so we'll go with 33%, which means 4,500 leads are required. So for that $10 million to have any degree of rigour or reliability, the pipeline or funnel needs to have 500 plus 1,500 plus 4,500 equals 6,500 actions in it, touching 4,500 prospects or leads. Now the next question obviously then is, how many do you actually have? And the answer invariably is, well, firstly, we don't know, but secondly, we're pretty sure it's nowhere near that. And here in this simple discussion is the unfair game that most organisations are playing and losing. Somehow they fail to understand that wins don't happen without proposals, that proposals don't happen without meetings, and that meetings don't happen without leads. Everything has to work or nothing works. You can close proposals at 80%, and we've got clients who do that. But without enough leads, it doesn't matter. And as if that weren't bad enough, what we're looking at here on this page is only year 1. So to sustain revenue year on year, this funnel or pipeline needs to have that many buyers in it all the time. Right? In fact, the beauty of this simple equation is that it shows there are in fact only 3 ways to increase a revenue outcome. 1, increase your average sale value. 2, increase the volume of leads, meetings or proposals. Or 3, improve those conversion percentages.
Before we move on, and without wanting to flag the baseball metaphor to death, it's very similar to what Billy Beane first recognized at Oakland. Measure how successful you are at getting it to first base, your on-base percentage, and then work out how to improve it. Then follow exactly the same approach for getting to second, third, and ultimately home. It isn't about filling up the line with your guys who can smash the ball into the next postcode, although you do need some of them. But it's really about getting everyone to do those simple, unspectacular things well over and over again. In other words, it's about process. Against that backdrop, what does the game of revenue look like at the moment? Well, not too good as it happens. These numbers come from a study published by the Harvard Business Review in 2011. And it's not clear how the authors got the data, but even if it's off by an order of magnitude, it's still pretty bad. And if that's not bad enough, they also concluded that $1,760 of profit per sale is needed just to cover the cost of failed sales meetings. So in anybody's language, that's a pretty depressing state of affairs.
But we've been doing some of our own research since 2006, and so this is data that we can claim quite some confidence in. And last year, nearly half of all the sales reps in B2B and business to government didn't make target. So what's significant about this figure, beyond how bad it is that it's also trending down. In 2006, when we first began surveying, albeit on a much smaller sample size, the number was 42% not making target. So a 15% increase in the failure proportion in 5 years. It's not too good. A few more statistics from our research, but the last one is the really interesting one. If you adjust the 48% non-performance stat from the previous slide for the amount of time that the average salesperson gets to actually spend selling, the performance doesn't look quite as bad. It's also interesting because it's a pointer towards something we concluded quite a long time ago, that much of the responsibility for terrible revenue performance rests with the antiquated structures and practices within which salespeople are forced to operate. We actually have a half-day workshop on this which goes into a lot more detail than we've got time for today. But it's the process that's broken, not just a few of the salespeople, although some of those are broken too. So here's something to think about. At 31%, that means your average sales rep spends 74.4% of his or her total available work days per year selling. And on those 74.4 days, gets on average halfway to their target. And if all we did was find each salesperson 45 more days to sell on, which would only take them up to 50% of their utilization, the average percentage of target achieved would go up to 84. Now, that's a very rough calculation, but it's worth pondering.
In October of 2009, a woman by the name of Shara Drew Morgan published a terrific book called Dirty Little Secrets, Why Buyers Can't Buy and Sellers Can't Sell, and What You Can Do About it. Well, here's a dirty little secret about revenue performance that we find astonishes and depresses a lot of people. At the moment, the average end-to-end conversion rate of the B2B sales pipeline is just 2.4%. In other words, for every 100 buyers who begins the journey towards buying something, less than 3 make it to the end. And as you can see, this particular metric has been in decline for some time. A lot of people incorrectly blame this on the global financial crisis, but as you can see from the chart, this trend was well and truly underway before the economy tanked. I think, John, at this point in time, we have a polling question for the audience.
We do, and let me go ahead and launch the first of 3 polling questions right now. You should be seeing that on your screen in just a moment. And there we go. So where do you think your company's average sales closure ratio is relative to, where's your company's actual sales closure ratio in comparison to the 2.4% average? Better, the same, worse, or I don't know. And I'll give folks about 40 seconds to jump in on this, and we're seeing answers very quickly. Okay, I'll leave this open for another 5 seconds, and then we'll jump right back in to the presentation. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this down now. Close, and back to you guys.
Okay,
Great.
So let's dig into that 2.4% a little deeper. In fact, the effectiveness of each major stage in the revenue process has also been declining as well. The slide we were on, there we go, illustrates the 3 most commonly recognized stages of the excuse me, B2B pipeline, and is in fact, this is the source of the 1/3, 1/3, 1/5 metrics we used back on the earlier slide. So you see proposal to close on the right, meeting to proposal in the center, and lead to meeting on the left. As you can see, since 2006, everything's been declining. And you might observe proposal to close and say that since 2009, the ratio's only declined by 0.4%, and what's the big deal about that? Well, the big deal is that this process operates like compound interest. If you multiply the 3 2011 ratios together, you get your 2.4%. So, as senior execs, CEOs, CFOs, what other process in your business would you allow to fail 97.6% of the time without taking a very serious look at what was going on, let alone the process that's responsible for delivering the lifeblood of the company, which is revenue?
And so because all this is happening or not happening in the background, we end up having this same conversation that we started with over and over again with CEOs, CFOs, and their sales leaders. So what are organizations doing in response? Well, it's never been a better time to be selling CRM or sales training. And I should say, first of all, that there's absolutely nothing wrong with CRM systems or most of the leading sales training approaches. But what is wrong is the ignorant assumption that they're all you need to do to turn the situation around. As you can see from this slide, which plots Australian CRM and sales training versus the B2B pipeline conversion since 2006, something just isn't quite right. And so what's missing is the process that the technology and the sales talent need to enable. Without the process, even the best CRM systems are just, technology, and 80% of what gets taught in sales training courses is forgotten in 45 days. And so you're right back from where you started from. So you can see a fairly self-explanatory conclusion from Barry Traylor and Jim Dickey at CSO Insights. The world of buying and selling has changed, and everything that sales managers have learned from their experience doesn't prepare them for what they face now. It's not that they're slack or dumb or bad people. Most or none of these. In fact, they're working harder than ever, but getting less return for their efforts. And it's because the game that they're used to playing isn't the same one that buyers are playing. Nor is marketing making much of a contribution to the problem either. And unfortunately, that situation probably won't change soon. In 2 recent studies of CEOs, less than 24% of CEOs around the world have much confidence that their marketing organizations really contribute to the creation of revenue. Just what they're contributing to is an interesting question, but we'll save that. So what we're saying is that neither sales managers nor marketing managers are capable of solving this problem. So if you think about it, most sales and marketing organizations spend more time fighting with each other than working together. We're working, for example, with one of the biggest and best-known technology companies in the world, and their marketing and salespeople have just only figured out or agreed on what a qualified lead is. So they have to work together, but they can't. And this is why this is a CFO and perhaps more interestingly, a CFO problem now. But we'll get to that in a bit. But right now we want to ask another polling question.
All right, let's jump on into polling question number 2, which you'll be seeing in just a moment. I'll take this time to remind folks that even if you're not here for CPE credit, we'd love to know what the results are for you or your company on these questions, and it's just a few seconds to read it and click the mouse, so we greatly appreciate that. I'll also remind everyone that we'd encourage you to ask questions as we go. We will have a Q&A period when we're done with the presentation. We'd love to get all questions answered today, so feel free to jump on in if you've got any at any time. I will go ahead and leave this question open for another 5 seconds, and then we will keep going on. Okay, why don't we keep chugging ahead here. I will close that one, and back to you, gentlemen.
Okay. So without wishing to kick the marketing folks too much while they're down, most of them are also still trying to figure out what social media means. I wonder if any of our listeners have received a coherent business case yet from marketing on how their investment in social, is driving, how much revenue.
So what actually is what's going on? What are the root causes of this problem? Well, essentially there are 4. Firstly, markets are more complex and more fragmented than ever. We've got fragmenting customer segments, simultaneous demand for multiple products across segments, the evolution of the internet and decline of traditional media, and just this massive proliferation of touch points that are demanded by customers across industries. Second one, we've got organizational challenges. Simultaneous challenge for growth and cost containment, which is pretty much global post the GFC. Sales and marketing, siloed, misaligned, not working together. General lack of process, metrics, and performance measurement, and really no repeatability, consistency, or sustainability across the process. As a result, sales forces are under more stress than ever. Aggressive revenue and margin targets, despite repeated failures in the past. Decreasing tenure, challenges to incentive and how to motivate people. But the big one that's running through, in fact, all the other 3, is a changing buyer and customer behaviours. More decision makers and stakeholders, longer, more complex sales cycles, increased scrutiny over value proposition, return on investment. The world of selling has changed, and it's changed forever. So the first 4 are important, but it's the last one that's the real biggie. And in fact, in our view, it's the single thread that runs through most of these challenges. A guy named Fred Hassan said it best for mine back in 2005, actually, and his words have never been truer, that customers have moved on, sellers have not. And we see this every single day in just about every market you care to pick. And what Fred was talking about is what we call the decoupling of the buying cycle from the selling cycle. Now, back in the day, as a buyer of just about anything, I relied on sellers for the information and insights I needed to inform and then make my purchasing decision. Now, as a buyer of anything from office stationery to multi-million-dollar technology solutions, I can, and in fact do, make more than half of my buying journey without reference to salespeople or the organisations they represent at all. And to do that, I'm using all sorts of technology and communications advancements that tell me what I need to know. I can research technical aspects on the web. I can reach out to my peers and people I trust, social networks, tools such as LinkedIn and Facebook. And I can and will avoid marketers and sellers like the plague, particularly those who just want to bombard me with noise about how good they are and how good their products are. Now, just imagine for a minute what it's like to try and sell in that kind of environment. Not that long ago, the task of making revenue was actually fairly straightforward. Marketing generated awareness, whatever that is, and because all the information asymmetry favoured the sellers, as soon as the buyers entered the market, The sellers knew immediately because the buyers had to come for them for the information that they needed to make their buying decisions. Now, if we roll forward to the current day, and it's all very, very different. Marketing is still pretty much doing what they did before, which is a frustrating conversation for another day. Buyers are left to their own devices to travel through the middle stages of that buying discovery journey. And this is leaving sales to play the role pretty much, in many situations, of cannon fodder for procurement. Because they've had little, if any, chance to influence the shape of the buying decision or demonstrate value, they get left with one competitive lever to pull, and that's price. So welcome to the marketing to sales black hole. It's an awesome gravitational force into which an average of 68% of buying opportunities disappear without ever being seen again. It's been a long time since the buyer's journey was a straight line, but even as a windy road metaphor, it's still a fairly well-worn and well-documented path. I've seen quite a bit of commentary on blogs recently that the buyer's journey as a metaphor was finished, but even though the path is a lot more twisted and complex today than it ever has been, buyers are still traversing the same cognitive path they always have. They start from a point of being what we somewhat glibly call fat, dumb and happy. They feel some pain or anxiety, and if that pain is bad enough, they kick off some research around it. And depending on how that goes and how bad the pain is, they'll clarify or define what they need to do to make the pain go away. They'll ask for and receive some offers from providers with solutions. They'll choose someone, and they'll engage. So it isn't actually the journey that's changed, it's the complexities and dynamics between the waypoints that's changed. So our windy road now looks in many cases like a piece of spaghetti, with buyers seemingly moving in all sorts of different directions. But one simple thing hasn't changed, and it won't. Buyers, for the most part, are trying to buy. They have problems, and they want those problems solved. They're trying to move from point A to point B. What's changed is how they're making that journey. Rather than getting with the program and understanding their buyers better, sellers just cry flat, cry foul, and they blame the unfairness of the game. So what we have is a fundamental lack of alignment between how sellers sell and how buyers now buy. And that formerly symbiotic link has been broken and needs to get re-established. In many respects, the success we've had in recent years with our clients has come down to helping them understand how to re-establish that link with their buyers. And here we have our old friend the funnel with the simple steps in a typical buyer's journey or process just overlaid on it. And although there's argument for the funnel having had its day as a metaphor as well, from the seller's perspective, it's still as useful as it ever was. There's one major flaw, however, to thinking of this process using a funnel. I'll get to that in a minute. Aligned down the right-hand side of the page is an equally simple sales process, which aligns nicely with the steps in the buying process. So when buyers are untroubled and unaware, we need to create pain, a concept marketers really struggle with. Buyers who feel no pain will not buy anything. Once they're hurting and researching what they can do about their pain, our challenge is to make sure they find us during that research. And so on down through the steps in the process until ultimately our task is to close the sale and deliver whatever value it was that was promised in the first place. Now, the funnel metaphor does have its critics, and in some respects they're right. A gallon of water tipped into the top of a funnel eventually all falls out the bottom, but that's not so in the world of revenue. The problem with this funnel is that it leaks, and it leaks horribly. There's a guy named Hugh McFarlane from Math Marketing has been studying and commenting on funnel dynamics for many years. I recommend you visit his website at mathmarketing.com. In fact, the average funnel is leaking 97.6% of its water. But in this apparent flaw of logic comes a really powerful idea. The leakage, and therefore its mirror image, which is progression, can be measured. Here in this slide, we see a simple representation of how buyers might move through the beginning of their journey, untroubled and unaware, to the end through a typical sales funnel. 100 begin untroubled and unaware. 65% of those buyers feel some pain, which means that 35% don't. That's important. Come back to that in a minute. Of that 65%, 50% feel enough pain to conduct some research about what they might do about it, and 50% don't. We'll come back to them. And so on, right down through the process till we're left with our 3 buyers who actually buy something. Now, if you look at this simple example and pretend for a moment that it's yours, where are the biggest blockages in the system? Well, the most obvious is getting selected as a preferred supplier, i.e. not knocking out your competition. We're getting to propose only half of the times that the buyers identify their solution options. And whatever problem we're solving is only causing enough pain that 1 in every 2 buyers thinks it's worth researching. So if this were your funnel, you'd start in those 3 areas. Notice, however, that at least you know where to start. And that's a big part of what we're trying to share with people, particularly CEOs and CFOs. If you don't measure, you don't know. But when you do, look at how quickly you can see which parts of the process need attention. The other interesting thing to think about is what's happened to the 97.6% of the buyers we started with who didn't make it? Where do they go? Think about this. If this was our funnel, and if you're operating at the average conversion benchmarks, it kind of is, then 97.4% of your revenue opportunity is disappearing right now. So where's it going? Now, of course, sales isn't just a 2-dimensional phenomenon. To be accurate, you need to model for time, the time it takes for buyers to move down through the process. So in this slightly more complicated, more real-world model, we're modeling for the average progression down the right-hand side of the funnel, the percentages, and velocity down the left side, shown here in number of weeks. Now, all buyers move at their own speeds, but this is just a basic model to illustrate the concepts. We can and do get a lot more sophisticated than this. But armed with progression and velocity, and then with how much you want out of your revenue machine month by month, quarter by quarter, year by year, so you can see the bold figures along the bottom of the table on the right, now you can predict how many buyers you need to have at each stage of the journey, at each point of time, in order for those numbers to be a realistic possibility. Now, please resist the temptation as financial people to reverse engineer the actual figures. It'll just blow your head up. Each individual cell in this simple model has multiple entry and exit feeds, factoring in progression and time. So imagine, if you will, though, that you come to month 3 and your model tells you that you need to have 81 buyers identifying their requirements. What if we get there and we've only got 40? Well, firstly, we know that in 30 weeks' time there's going to be a fairly big hole in our revenue. That's 7.5 months for the CFOs to get the cash flow ready. In the meantime, knowing there's a hole, we can try and figure out what can be done to plug it before we drive into it. But it also tells us that the 30% we thought we were converting at, and perhaps the velocity assumptions at that part of the process aren't right either. We're not converting at 30%. We're probably only converting at 15% if half our projected buyers are missing. Okay. Let's change our model to reflect that reality, recompute what it means out into the future, and plan our business response accordingly. Simply measuring the process at this reasonably simplistic level opens up a whole new way to think about revenue management. One final thought. Remember the 97.6% of the buyers who leak out and never make it to the bottom. What if we could do something more productive with them than just allow them to wander off into the forest like Hansel and Gretel? This slide and the one following are identical in all respects except one. On this slide, every buyer who fails to make a progression in the funnel is assumed to be gone forever. As you can see, in 5 years, this process delivers $32 million of revenue to the business. Now watch what happens if all I do is recycle 75% of those lost buyers and bring them back into my marketing and sales machine. And if they leak out again, I'll recycle 75% again and again and again and so on. Watch what happens to the 32, 405. Instead of a total of 291 buyers making it to the bottom over 5 years, now more than 3,500 do. And as you can see, what happens to the revenue outcome? Imagine what doing this just 10% better could do. So welcome to the real power of what we call revenue performance management.
So as we wrap up, what have we been saying? Well, first of all, we've said revenue performance is a structural, organization-wide issue. It's systemic. It's a process that has not adapted to a changing buying process. Number two, sales and marketing cannot fix by themselves. Albert Einstein once said, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them. And too often, sales and marketing are stuck in their functional perspectives and therefore need the broader perspective from the CEOs and the CFOs to help. There are few more critical responsibilities of top management than revenue generation. Number three, revenue performance is like any other process in your company. It must be managed and measured. Yet somehow we felt that revenue was somehow different than operations or finance, and it didn't need that kind of discipline. Well, that's wrong. And finally, customers talk about being customer-centric. But how customer-centric can you be if you don't understand how your customers buy and how you need to align with their process, versus the other way around? So specifically, as CFOs, what should you do? Well, number one, you need to ask your sales and marketing leaders the 6 questions that Craig started out our conversation with, and let's review what those were. Question 1, what's your organization's new revenue target next year? Question 2, what's your organization's average sales or contract value? That provides the baseline parameters. Number 3, what's your organization's proposal to close ratio? Question 4, what's your meeting to proposal ratio? Question 5, what's your lead to proposal ratio? And finally, how many leads do you currently have? And if your organization is like over 90% of those that we see, you're going to need to work with them to bring them your skills in measurement and analytics to answer these questions. Then once you know where you are, you can work together to assess the problem areas and develop an action plan to address. So with that, I hope Craig and I have been able to share a little insight with you today. And John, I think we're now ready to open up some questions.
We've got one more polling question.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and get that out of the way really quickly here. So let me go ahead and pop that out there. Great information. Thanks to both of you. I can't wait to get to the Q&A here. I'll use this as a reminder to ask questions. We've got 2 folks who really know what they're talking about here and also understand how the Office of the CFO can help with this issue. And this is a serious issue. I've seen it many times in a number of companies. So let's go ahead and give another 10 seconds for this quick poll question. Then we'll, I think the first thing we'll do actually is turn around the polls and ask our 2 speakers what they think of the results. I'll give a few more seconds before I close this down. And there we go. And let's go ahead and take a look. So first polling question was, as compared to the average sales closure ratio of 2.4%, do you think your ratio is better, the same, worse? And I don't know. Well, Craig, I don't know. It's about 1/3 of folks. Is that common?
Very. In fact, it's interesting. I'm sure Bruce is thinking the same thing as he looks at these stats, as how close they are to the ones that we had from the CEO audience when we ran it a couple of weeks ago. Firstly, yeah.
Well, at least there's some agreement.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, not a very optimistic view, given that most people either have results worse than that or don't even know.
Yeah.
Can I just sorry, John, can I just make one comment?
Yeah, of course.
Now, it's it's not unusual that that CFOs mightn't have this kind of data immediately to hand. So kind of there's some explanation for the I don't know, but I'll bet you when they go back and ask their sales guys, they won't know either.
Mm-hmm. We'll put that out as extra credit homework. Let's go ahead and take a look at the second question. How confident are you that your current sales and marketing processes can meet your revenue targets? I guess the confident to very confident is about 40%, and then about 60% of are somewhat unconfident or very unconfident. Only 6% don't know. I don't know. I guess this looks like a pretty normal distribution to me. Craig, anything surprising here?
No, not really. Pretty much. I'm actually take some confidence in the U.S. economy that there's not more in very unconfident. So maybe things are looking a bit better.
Let's hope so. And this last one here is pretty much a slam dunk. Although it's interesting, I thought there would be more of the "we could if the sales team would let us" answers here. I've seen a lot of resistance over the years for process and technology changes, and quote unquote letting the office of the CFO help you. Measure these things, and there's a lot of stat in my sandbox, or maybe they just don't want to see what the real numbers are, et cetera. What do you think about this, Craig?
I love that it's such a willingness to get involved, and I just encourage those that get pushback from the sales and marketing guys that these people do actually need your help. They know they don't have the answer, but it's been so long since anybody's come into the world of sales with a different way of thinking that people find it very threatening. Some of these sales guys haven't had anyone come and challenge the way that they did things yesterday and the day before and the week before that for 30 or 40 years. So it's time.
So how do you approach these folks? What's the best way for a VP of Finance or a CFO to offer their help in some meaningful way with a chance of being accepted? Craig, how do you recommend folks start down this path?
Well, the way we've seen it work really well with the clients that we've been working with down here in Australia is simply by opening up those questions, the 6 questions that Bruce asked. Now, we find typically that sales directors, CSOs, will find it a little threatening to begin with, but you've got to understand that they're accountable for this result, whether they like it or not. They're the guys who ultimately own the revenue number. But the getting the sales guys on side is really easy once you get to the marketing part of the conversation. Once you start talking to them about who's going to produce the qualified leads for sales, and when you talk in the volumes that we are, if it's a factor of 50 times you required closures for lead generation. Sales teams just cannot physically, logistically generate enough demand by themselves. It has to be done by somebody else. It has to be done by marketing. So start with the sales director. Start with your CSO. Get him or her on side, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to have the crosshairs on their forehead if it doesn't work. And most of them would love to have an ally in the Office of Finance.
So redirecting to Bruce here, this sounds like a sort of classic people, process, and technology issue, and you could break each one of those down and go into each area. to try and determine how the finance organization can help their company uncover, these issues, the knowledge, create the measurements and metrics, feed that back into their system, et cetera, to determine what they need to do, et cetera. How are people doing this? Is this, we saw that ominous increased expenditure in CRM systems and decreasing results, which I guess is how we've tried to do that in the past. What are people doing that's having success?
Well, so as you referred, I mean, there's a lot of attempts to do that are not successful because they're working at the at the level of the problem rather than the solution, and not thinking about it from a systemic way. But where we are seeing success is where they are stepping back and looking at it as a systemic issue, where it's a cross-functional issue, where it's not a sales problem or a marketing problem. It's a revenue generation problem that really needs to have that the kind of holistic view. And so when we've seen CFOs work with their CSOs and CMOs with the support of the general manager in a cooperative, cross-functional way to get the facts, to identify the root causes, and then work collectively on initiatives that are that they know are going to address the real problem, that's when we start to see results.
And I can easily imagine these numbers driving a significant rethink when it comes to resources. So if you haven't thought of, or in this way, of how many qualified leads you need to put into the system, then you are probably going to have to go back and rethink your marketing strategy, how many heads, how many marketing program dollars, et cetera, and then further down the pipeline, okay, if we need to have this many meetings, but we don't have enough sales bodies to have that many meetings, you could seriously be rejiggering that entire piece of your P&L. Is there a lot of consternation, Craig, when you go into companies and deliver this message to the CEO and their team around resources?
No, actually, because what we find, I mean, everyone's familiar with the old joke about I know I'm wasting half my marketing budget, I just don't know which half it is. So when we take this proposition in, we're typically going in with a story that says, look, firstly we're going to figure out reasonably quickly where things aren't working, and therefore where the wastage is. In most cases, not all, but in most cases, at least the initial part of the turnaround in these kinds of exercises is cost neutral, because we'll typically go into an organisation. I mean, this is just thinking of a case study of 2 weeks ago. There's an organisation that had 24 sales guys, less than half of them getting within 20% of their target, and we were able to, by making a few simple changes, point out where things could be improved significantly and how they could do it with 6 less heads. So 6 sales guys, circa $100,000 a pop, just became superfluous to the sales part of the equation. Now, a couple of those guys got redirected into other parts of the organisation, so it's not just a matter of going in and shooting people, but there's so much wastage across marketing and sales. It's really a matter of you're not going to increase the spend in marketing or selling. You're actually just going to get more efficient. It's really like the Billy Bean story that Bruce started out with. It's getting the result for a far less cost per win.
And Bruce, are finance organizations expanding their forecasting and planning models to go now to the lead level and to use this kind of math to help act as drivers within those models?
Yeah, the sophisticated ones are, and they're less likely just to kind of accept the sales forecast from what the CSO might predict, because they know that that's generally just a historical view and just extrapolating from the past, which may or may not be accurate. Particularly as we kind of live in kind of a more volatile environment, with a lot of change. So yes, the sophisticated ones are going deep to really understand what's driving that revenue in the same sort with the same sort of analytics that Craig talked about at the end.
Mm-hmm. Craig, do these principles apply to B2C businesses as well as B2B businesses?
Look, the principles do. It's just that the buying journey is different. In B2C, so much more of the buying decision is influenced by what happens in the last 10 feet, and there's much more emphasis on influencing the buyer mindset with above the line. But the concept of someone's starting out from a position where they're just kind of in a status quo, and something triggering a behaviour, triggering a desire. Typically, it's a problem, but some sort of pain, something they don't have that they want. That cognitive journey in their head, that takes them down the buyer's journey. It holds across into B2C. I've got to say, more so, much more so in the higher end decisions where a purchase is either expensive or complex. It's a very different world. Buying sort of Mars bars and chewing gum from the local service station.
Right. And then now we've focused much of today's discussion on companies with direct sales model. There are a lot of companies out there that sell online or through channels or have a mixed model more frequently these days. Does this process, this thought process apply?
Yeah, this is Bruce. I mean, absolutely. I mean, essentially, an indirect channel is essentially, a channel that's not in your organization, that you basically have a partner that is doing those activities for you. So the same principles apply. In fact, sometimes we even see more dysfunction in those kinds of situations because the communication, the coordination with marketing, understanding what a lead is, all those kinds of questions and issues that we talked about earlier are even less defined. So absolutely it applies. And then when you think about online marketing, again, you have to think about how that whole experience aligns with how the buyer buys, and the internet is becoming very much a part of how buyers are learning about products and learning about services. So if you aren't thinking about how internet is being applied there, you're missing a big part of the equation.
Thanks, Craig. Anything to add to that?
I just point out to a financial audience one simple point just to close with. Just think back to those 3 steps in the sales process: the proposal to close, meeting to proposal, and lead to meeting. If you were to improve each of those steps, just those 3 steps, if you could improve each of those from 33% to 35, 33 to 35, so just 2 points at the top 2 stages, and then to improve your proposal to close from 20% to 22, so just make 2% improvements at each point, at each of those 3 steps, you'll get 24% compound improvement by the time you get to the revenue line, and that's the power of this thing. It's incremental improvements based on simple measures, and that's something that CFOs absolutely get.
Great. and thank you for that. I think we're going to close on that great note. We have a couple of items here. Number one, you will be prompted to take a short survey once this webinar concludes. We greatly appreciate your feedback regarding this event. Also, it's very easy during that survey to request a connection with today's speakers or Baker Tilly, our wonderful sponsor. Just click the mouse away. We're happy to help make those connections and then get more of your questions answered. If you have any questions about CPE credit, you can contact Chris Brower. You can see her email at the bottom. Things like this get discussed all the time on Performative, so please come and join us at performative.com. And speaking of joining us, I just want to do a quick shout out. Performative has Performatech coming up March 20th at the Hyatt SFO, which is all about technology for finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. Like everything we do here, you have to be a qualified finance professional to attend, but then attendance is free. We've got a great cast of speakers and companies who will be there, so we'd love to see you there. And a final thanks to Bruce and Craig. Just fantastic information today, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time and insights. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure is ours. Thank you so much. Final thanks to our friends at Baker Tilly. Thanks for allowing us to put this event on at no cost to the attendees. Baker Tilly, obviously a fantastic resource for topics like we covered today and a whole host of others, and we greatly appreciate their support. So thanks to them, and thanks to everyone who attended today. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and close down the webinar proper, and you will be sent to take the quick survey. So we greatly appreciate that. Have a great rest of the week. Great holidays coming up for everyone. I wish everyone a great end of the year and New Year's. And take care. We'll see you again at performative.com or at another Performative event. Cheers all.